You're listening to the Trade Show Insights Podcast, Season 15, Episode 1. I'm your host and exhibit marketing strategist, Marlis Arnold, bringing you tools to improve your exhibit results. On today's episode, brought to you by the Exhibit Marketers Cafe, we're doing a little time traveling. We're going back to 2010, where I made some predictions about 2020. So back in January of 2010, I wrote a letter to my Trade Show Tips e-zine subscribers from the perspective of 10 years in the future. Now that we've arrived at that milestone, it only seems appropriate to pull that letter back out and see how far we've come, or not. So for this Back to the Future post, I've included my original writing as the main part of the podcast, while I've added a few comments as appropriate to clarify. Okay, so here we go. Back in 2010, I wrote, I've always tried to look down the road in this industry, watching and sensing what's coming next. I was talking about road shows and virtual shows when most people still felt threatened by them, and also jumped wholehearted into social media as soon as the tools began to appear. So with this new decade, I felt it appropriate to cast a 10-year vision of where the exhibit industry will be in 2020. And in all fairness, this perspective was inspired by an article I read in the Las Vegas Sun on the future of that city as seen in 2020. So here we are. A 2020 perspective. No one can forget the dreary days back in 2009 and 2010 when trade show attendance was plummeting throughout nearly all industries. At that time, many people were predicting the demise of the trade show industry, sacrificed to the trend of virtual shows. But as the future unfolded, that didn't prove to be the case. In fact, the two worlds have found a way to coexist in harmony. Most physical shows now have a virtual component to extend their events throughout the year. Some have a gaming system style interface offering nearly lifelike interactions. You can actually see and talk with other exhibitors and attendees right from your office or any other location. For smaller shows with smaller budgets, there are a myriad of other options that still provide an enhanced, although less realistic, experience. The term pop-up exhibit has a new meaning, with most shows offering interactive show floor maps where each booth is clickable, bringing up a photo and FAQ sheet for that exhibitor. So now the reality in 2020, some shows are better at this than others, but they're still not near lifelike interactions. Keep in mind, at the time I wrote this, apps like Second Life were getting lots of buzz. And by the way, you can Google that if you're not familiar with what that is. But trade shows are not video games. Show apps may sometimes offer interactive floor maps, but they often focus more on building a list of favorites and or scheduling meetings. Now, Core Apps does have a floor route planning feature in their apps. Some shows also offer audio tours or gamified elements. All right, now back in 2010, I wrote, another reason for the success of these virtual components is the mandatory green legislation, which has changed nearly every aspect of physical exhibiting: lighting, construction, carpeting, literature and giveaways, and carbon footprints. With these restrictions, there is a compelling need to buy local in the show city to reduce both shipping and waste. Industry vendors have developed branch offices in all the major trade show cities, and also many second-tier cities, in order to avoid losing business as clients move from one city to another. There's also an extensive network of professional booth staff for hire to help companies save on travel costs and carbon impact. In addition, most convention centers now feature solar panels and vegetable gardens on their rooftops, offering both energy savings and cleaner air. Now fast forward to 2020. While there's no mandatory green legislation save for eliminating plastic straws, there are a lot more options for ways to be more eco-friendly. There are a wealth of sustainable material options for building exhibit displays. LEDs are now the standard for lighting, and there's even flooring made from recycled materials. I know this because we actually have carpet made from plastic water bottles in our house. Exhibitors typically take less print materials to shows, and if they're not scaling back on the amount of giveaways, which they should, at least they're often donating them to local schools or other organizations after the show. Signage and badges are often designed to be reused at future events. More food is brought in from local sources. Some is even grown on the roof of the convention center. There's been a big push to donate leftover food to local homeless shelters, with Good Samaritan laws protecting the donors. Other food waste is often composted. So back in 2010, I wrote, "Security is one aspect that no one in 2010 wanted to admit was lacking, but unfortunately, incidents around the globe no longer allowed the exhibit world to hide its head in the sand any longer. While entering a convention center is still far from the routine at airports, security checkpoints are an added component of shows, both in logistics and expense. While exhibitors initially grumbled about the increase in booth fees, they now see the added services as a way to increase show attendance." So, reality today in 2020, it seems security hasn't changed all that much in spite of the rising number of mass shootings at venues of all kinds during the past decade. I won't go off on that soapbox here, but if you want to know more about this important topic, you'll find several previous posts on Trade Show Insights. Back in 2010, I wrote, "The Gen Ys were just beginning to impact the trade show industry. Now they have become an integral part of the changes, driving much of the technology and environmental sensitivity transitions. Their expectation of fluid change has become standard now that most of the change-resistant generation has retired. Every show is expected to have a social media component, regardless of how sophisticated the virtual show is. Exhibitors and attendees are able to find each other and form connections long before they set foot on the show floor. Now the physical show is more like a school reunion rather than a first date." So the reality now in 2020, the boomers aren't yet retiring, but Gen Ys, or millennials, are now the largest part of the workforce. Social media and apps play a role in creating community, but all of that technology must be embraced by the show organizer, which some are still hesitant to do. So back in 2010, I wrote, "It's been exciting to watch the industry transition over the past decade as trade shows have not died, but rather evolved into responsible corporate citizens. And with our burgeoning technology, we are not resisting face-to-face events, but rather craving them as a way to stay connected." Wow, here in 2020, that is so true. In fact, at the time I wrote this letter back in 2010, I really didn't realize just how much it would be true in our present day, over-digitized culture. So what do you think? How has the industry evolved over the last 10 years? And how did I do with these predictions? Is it where you think it should be? Please leave a comment in the show notes at tradeshowinsights.com and let me know. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to hear more, subscribe to the Trade Show Insights podcast and automatically receive future episodes on your chosen device. Simply click on podcast in the top menu at tradeshowinsights.com, then subscribe, and you'll find instructions for Apple, Spotify, and many more. Trade Show Insights is protected by the Creative Commons copyright license. You may feel free to share this recording with colleagues or embed it on your own blog as long as it's shared in its entirety and is not used for commercial purposes. To learn more, please see the link in the sidebar of the show notes at tradeshowinsights.com. Well, that's it for this episode of Trade Show Insights. Be sure to check out our show notes and archives at tradeshowinsights.com. You can also connect with me using the social media links or contact page on the site. I'm Marlis Arnold. Thanks for listening, and be sure to join us next time for more tools to improve your exhibit results.